I'm 22 years old, and I've been a die-hard Washington fan my entire life. And one day, just one day, I hope that they're at least a competent franchise, but I'm not betting on it. Nothing is surprising anymore, not even getting blown out in back-to-back weeks by the Eagles and then the Cooper Rush-led Cowboys. The Commanders just looked awful again. Carson Wentz had no time to throw the ball at all. The offensive line is so bad. The one guy on offense who you really do expect to dominate is Terry McLaurin, who only had 2 catches for 15 yards. There just isn't really anything to be optimistic about. Like maybe Washington is bad enough to get a CJ Stroud or Bryce Young at the draft or something. But even then, do you actually think the Commanders can develop a young quarterback? The Commanders got dominated 25-10. And you know what? Credit to Cooper Rush. He has been much better than I think anyone really expected, and we even just made a video about it. It was still embarrassing. The Cowboys did whatever they wanted. Wentz threw 2 picks, and on defense, Washington couldn't stop anything. At one point, CeeDee Lamb caught like 3 or 4 straight passes with Jamin Davis in coverage. That's just another whole mess. Davis was literally a first-round pick last year, and he has sucked in every way. I just really don't have a lot of positive things to say. I don't about this season, and I really didn't after week 3. One of the only things worse than losing to a division rival is getting blown out by a division rival in back-to-back weeks. Losing to Dallas always hurts the most, because there were times where Washington felt like it kinda had a chance. That was not the case in week 3. The Commanders lost 24-8 to the Eagles, and while the score was similar to week 4, the game was not. Washington got blasted. They were down 24-0 at half. Those 8 points all came in the 4th quarter. They nearly got shut out. I guess if you want a positive, Carson Wentz didn't throw a pick. That's all I got. Antonio Gibson had 12 carries, and he didn't do anything with them. 3.2 yards per carry, but at least he scored the lone touchdown. McLaurin did have a good day with over 100 yards, but no one else even had 50. Jalen Hurts owned the Commanders' defense, and Devonta Smith specifically made them his bitch. He alone had 169 yards and a touchdown. It was embarrassing, and the week before that was too. We now know that the Lions are a pretty solid team, at least on offense. The defense is bad, but Detroit beat the hell out of Washington. The Commanders got clobbered by the Lions. That's very humbling. Washington was literally down 22-0 at the half. The run game was the worst I've really ever seen it. Gibson had 14 carries for 28 yards, 2 yards per carry. Wentz tossed 3 touchdowns and had over 300 yards, but it came with an interception and 5 sacks. And let's be real here, the only reason he actually put up good offensive numbers is because Washington was losing by so much. Jared Goff looked like a star. Goff scored 4 touchdowns and had over 250 yards. Amon-Ra St. Brown carved up the Commanders' defense all game. He even had 2 rushes for 68 yards in addition to 116 yards and 2 touchdowns receiving. Again, there just weren't very many positives to talk about after the game. The reality is, the Commanders are very lucky to not be 0-4 right now. If it wasn't for a week 1 win against the Jags, they would be, and I think, let's be real here, they probably should have lost that game. Jacksonville is pretty good, I think. It just maybe took a bit of time to really figure it out. The Commanders were up 14-3 at the half, and things were looking pretty damn good until the Jags rattled off 19 straight points to take a 22-14 lead with less than 12 minutes left. It was a rough blow, but Washington did end up winning. Wentz hit McLaurin for a 49-yard bomb, and then Wentz hit Jahan Dotson late in the game to win it. Good start. Washington was 1-0. It felt like there was a chance, but it's never that easy in Washington. Come on. On Monday, after Washington fell to 1-3, Ron Rivera was very frustrated, and it was pretty obvious. He said that,
I understand everybody's frustration, especially how proud this organization is. This organization's got 5 championships. You kidding me? I get it. I understand how important it is to win. Okay, but I got to be realistic with what we have and what we're going to do.
Yeah, so Rivera said they basically have to be realistic with what they have, and things aren't just going to change overnight, which is fair. This is year 3 for Rivera, and there haven't been many good changes, but that is hard to do in Washington. Every news story is something new that's just ridiculous. Dan Snyder has had scandal after scandal, and there aren't many moments where there isn't something awful going on for the Commanders. Ron Rivera was hired to do an impossible task, And for what it's worth, he did take Washington to the playoffs in his first season. Not to mention that he literally was diagnosed and beat cancer all in his short tenure so far in Washington. I know it's hard and it's been a tough 3 years with COVID, a name change, and crazy things going on behind the scenes, but I think we just need to give Ron Rivera some time and most importantly remember that this is all Dan Snyder's fault. There have been a lot of problems, obviously, but the one big glaring one on the field has been Carson Wentz. Through 4 weeks, he has over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. It just hasn't been good enough. I think people were way too hard on him last year, and he was actually really good statistically in Indianapolis, but it just hasn't gone well in Washington. Like I said, he has 5 picks through 4 games, and he only had 7 all last year. I get it. Washington had to do something. That's why they traded a second and 2/3 for him. For what it's worth, that was a huge overpay, and everyone knows that, but it allowed the Colts to just move on to Matt Ryan. Not that that's working well for them either, but Washington did still get fleeced. At the same time, the other players that I would have preferred over Wentz would have been Ryan or Baker Mayfield, and it's not like any of those guys are working out anyway. I really did enjoy watching Taylor Heinicke start for Washington last year. It was very frustrating at times, but I enjoyed it, and I can't help but wonder if maybe he would be better right now. I know that might sound a little crazy, but just hear me out. I think Carson Wentz is a much more talented quarterback than Taylor Heinicke, but this offense just isn't moving the ball at all. It's a completely dysfunctional, awful offense, and whatever Washington can do to improve that, it should. The biggest issue right now on the offense is the line. They can't stop anyone from getting through. And Wentz isn't mobile enough to maneuver or figure things out. Regardless, Washington is screwed. But I can't help but think that maybe Heinicke behind center would be able to make some plays or at least put up some points. Yeah, he's probably going to turn the ball over a lot, do some dumb shit, but the Commanders would at least score some points. And it's not like Wentz is protecting the ball either. I feel like I have to at least bring up Sam Howell. Like, keep in mind that the QB selected 7 spots ahead of him. Bailey Zappi looked pretty solid for the Patriots. Washington drafted Howell to be the backup, obviously, but I do have to wonder if he gets a shot at all. It's not necessarily like he was some late round project. You know, Howell was projected to be a first overall pick at one point until he completely fell apart his last season at UNC. I don't think there's a lot of optimism for him to really turn into some NFL starting caliber QB, but wouldn't you want to know sooner rather than later? It's starting to look like the Commanders are going to have a high pick at the draft, and I really do think that's going to be a quarterback if Wentz continues this way. Week 4 just ended, and I'm already talking about the draft. That's Washington football for you. To make matters even worse, every other team in the NFC East has a winning record. The Eagles are the only undefeated team in football. The Cowboys are 3-1, despite losing Dak Prescott to a thumb injury in a Week 1 loss. The Giants are somehow 3-1, so I don't know how. The NFC East is the only division in football with 3 winning teams. The only one that isn't is the Commanders. It's going to be a very long season for Washington fans like myself. There is a serious chance that the Commanders are the worst team in football this year. They are tied for the worst team in football right now at 1-3. And at the very least, we'll see what happens, but maybe they get a high draft pick. But honestly, with the way this team goes, they'll probably win a couple games just to ensure that we can't get a high pick and everything just continues the same way it has for years in mediocrity.